it will be held as the way to make up for the losses. The attempts to impose upon Ukraine the so-called Ruski Mir will also be punished. The war crimes that we have identified here on the slides, the major task that we see is this: to hold accountable every criminal who has been engaged in these crimes in the territory of Ukraine. The specialized committee yesterday were discussing what we are supposed to be doing, and I will brief you on what we have identified so far after these regions and areas have been liberated, and how these materials will be used for the future investigation and referring to the international criminal bodies. At this slide, you'll see the city of Irpin, the whole area before and after that, what happened. On the 24th of February, the Russian Federation began a full-scale war.
Мостів, за допомогою яких відбувався проїзд до міста Ірпінь. 4.03 в житловому кварталі Річтаун міста Ірпіня було розірвана перша міна калібру 82-го.
We identified a number of heavy weapons that were used in shelling the civilians in the city of Bucha. The civilians were evacuated due to the efforts of the local authorities. And those people that were living in the Irpin area. Then the city of Bucha was under the shelling of the mines, after which the self-propelled personnel carriers and armored carriers entered the city, including the personnel carrier 2 and 3 from the direction of Zabucha. In this area, we saw what the occupying force were doing. They executed 82 persons that were tortured before. They also shot dead a couple that were trying to get out of that city in their own car. Another person who was denying to carry out their orders was shot dead. And those who were helping the Ukrainian armed forces, those civilians, were also executed. We have identified and investigated the remnants of the 2,069 persons. Their bodies will be sent for forensic expertise. And after all the necessary proceedings are completed, they will be given over to their relatives to be buried. Since the fighting was taking place on a daily basis, as we were able to identify and talking to those people who are still living there, the shellings were taking place from 5 to 7 in the morning, and in the afternoon, a number of very many households were razed to the ground. In the vicinity of different industrial facilities, also the civilian households were completely ruined. Near the city of Bucha, they were attacked by the aircraft with the support of the heavy artillery. In the city of Irpin, the Ukrainian armed forces entered in and liberated the city on the 28th of March. After that, the national police began to investigate the site. We investigated the sites of the executions by the Russian soldiers of the Ukrainian civilians. We have looked into 37 places with the unexploded devices. Different private properties, households are now investigated. These are the places where civilians were staying, and the Russian Federation soldiers were looting these places, raping people, and so on. We have identified the remnants of those shellings and different remnants of the artillery shells. We have now conducted about 87 forensic examinations that will lead for further investigation and bringing those to justice. All the necessary investigative proceedings are taking place. I would like to mention one point, how the materials will be referred to the International Criminal Court, something that we have been able to identify, how the Russian soldiers were shelling the civilian district. When we talked to the dwellers who were staying in the basement and they were cooking in the street, they didn't see any Ukrainian soldiers. That is to say, all the districts that were shelled, there were no representatives of the Ukrainian armed forces or the territorial defense. In the city of Bucha, in the distance of about 1,000 meters in front of this district, you see where the shellings were coming from. Every day, they were shelled from tanks, from artillery. And you will see what has happened as the result. Can you imagine what the local dwellers were living through? Now our investigators are registering the trajectory of the shelling. We're also registering the distance, and this is the picture that we have come up with, where we document where the weaponry of the Russians were staying, their equipment from which they were shelling this particular compound, civilian compound. This is a kind of information that will be referred to the International Court. So the work is currently underway. Our investigators have a lot of work to do, and we will inform you about the ongoing process in the liberated Ukrainian cities. Currently, most experienced investigators, forensic experts, and prosecutors are engaged in the process. I'm sure that we will be able to restore what had happened and register and document all the war crimes committed in the territory of Ukraine. Together with the international community, I'm sure we will hold those responsible for these crimes, including those who participated and those who gave orders. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard about the major areas of investigation and how the proceedings will take place internationally. Questions, please. Espresso TV channel. You were talking about the war crimes in the Kiev territory. We are still having other occupied territories, including in the east. Some members of the police force are turning cold and are joining the occupying forces. Can you tell us what will happen to those people and whether you are receiving the information on the war crimes in the occupied territories. I will begin with the latter part. The fact of registering these war crimes are done by a special task force in the national police. And although those territories you mentioned are still under occupation, we still have the information incoming, although physically we cannot go there and verify it. But we are verifying the information as far as we can. As for the national police officers who have joined the enemy and the aggressor, we have a special body, the National Investigation Bureau. This falls under their powers to investigate such cases. Do you have any information on those people who have joined the aggressors, whether they can share very sensitive information? I can't tell you at this point in time what that sensitive information may be. Do you have any more questions? Thank you.